The rain had a way of making the old university look alive. Water slid down the stone walls like tears, and the gargoyles perched above the entrance seemed to watch every student who crossed the courtyard. Lamps flickered under the storm, their light breaking through the darkness in weak golden halos dot among the sea of umbrellas and rushing footsteps. There was one student who moved more slowly than the rest. Her name was Clara Hale. She walked with her head bent, clutching her books to her chest as if they were armor. To anyone passing by, she seemed ordinary, another tired student weighed down by lectures, assignments, and too much coffee. But Clara was not ordinary. People said she noticed things others ignored. A shadow where no shadow should be. A door that always seemed to breathe when no one touched it. The sound of footsteps in empty hallways. It was easy to call her imaginative. But Clara knew imagination wasn't enough to explain what followed her. The university had stood for centuries. Its towers touched the storm clouds. Its halls were lined with portraits whose painted eyes seemed to move when no one watched. Even the library carried a certain heaviness, as though the books themselves remembered things they should have forgotten. And Clara, ever curious, ever restless, felt the weight of those memories pressing on her. That night, after her last class, she lingered. The storm had cleared, leaving the campus wet and glistening. Moonlight spilled across the cobblestones like a silver river. She told herself she was only walking back slowly to enjoy the quiet, but the truth was different. She felt something was waiting. It had begun with dreams. For weeks she had woken in the night with her heart racing, her skin damp, and the echo of a low growl in her ears. In the dream, she stood in the same courtyard, but she was never alone. There was always a man, a figure cloaked in shadow, with eyes that glowed like embers. He never touched her, never spoke. Yet she woke with the memory of his gaze burning inside her. Now walking under the cold silver moon. Clara felt it again, that same gaze. She paused in front of the old philosophy hall. Its windows dark, its wooden doors carved with symbols that no student could explain. Her professor, Elias Valen, taught there. He was known for his brilliant mind, his strict rules, and the strange energy that seemed to hum around him. Most students feared him. Clara did not. Perhaps that was her first mistake. As she looked up at the tall windows, her breath caught. A shadow moved across the glass dot. Clara froze, heart hammering. The building was locked at night. She knew that. She had seen the caretaker seal the doors hours ago. And yet, someone was inside. The shadow paused as if it knew she was watching. Her throat tightened. She should leave. She should hurry across the courtyard, return to her dorm, and forget she had ever seen it. But her feet remained rooted to the whetstone. Curiosity always outweighed fear in her heart. Then came the sound. It was not footsteps, not the creak of old wood or the moan of pipes. It was deeper, primal, a low guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the glass, through the air. Through her bones, Clara stumbled back, books slipping from her arms. The sound stopped. Silence stretched across the courtyard, heavy and unnatural. The air felt colder, the shadows thicker, and then the door opened. Slowly, impossibly, the great oak door of Philosophy Hall pushed outward on its own. The iron hinges groaned, echoing through the night. Beyond the threshold there was only darkness. Not the kind of darkness that came from the absence of light, but a living blackness. Deep and watchful. Clara's lips parted, her breath visible in the icy air. She took one step forward, drawn against her will. Something inside her whispered that answers lay in that darkness, that every dream, every shadow, every strange sound in the night pointed to this moment. But just as she reached the door, she saw him. A figure stood in the gloom, tall, broad-shouldered, and perfectly still. His face was hidden, but his eyes burned faintly, catching the moonlight like a predator's. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Rain dripped from the gutters, wind rattled the windows. But none of it seemed real compared to those eyes. Clara's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. She wanted to speak, to ask who he was, why he was there, but no words came. The figure leaned forward, just enough for her to see a flash of white teeth, sharp, Inhuman. Her heart stopped. Then the door slammed shut. The sound thundered across the courtyard, breaking the spell. Clara staggered back, her body trembling. The night was silent again. The windows of Philosophy Hall reflected only her pale face. Wide-eyed and shaken, she picked up her books with trembling hands, forcing herself to walk quickly, then faster, until she was nearly running across the cobblestones. Yet even as she fled, she felt the weight of those eyes still upon her, watching, waiting. Somewhere deep inside, Clara knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning, then whatever secret the professor held inside those walls. It was calling to her. Clara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, the burning eyes in the doorway, the sharp teeth glinting before the oak door slammed shut. The sound echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, refusing to fade. She turned her pillow again and again, but it was no use. By dawn, her body ached with exhaustion, and her heart felt heavy with dread. She told herself it had only been her imagination, that she had been tired, her senses dulled by rain and shadows. Yet when she left her dorm room and crossed the courtyard the next morning, Philosophy Hall seemed different. It stood too still, too quiet, as though it held its breath. Students rushed past, laughing, talking, their footsteps splashing through puddles. None of them looked at the tall building. None of them seemed to notice the faint black marks burned into the wood around the doorframe. Marks Clara swore hadn't been there the day before. She pressed her lips together and hurried toward her first lecture. But unease followed her like a shadow. That day felt longer than all the others. Every room seemed colder. Every hallway seemed darker. Even the library, her usual place of comfort, made her skin prickle. When she reached for a book from the upper shelf, a whisper brushed past her ear. "Clara." She froze, gripping the ladder. The library was silent. Students worked at tables below, heads bent over notebooks. No one looked at her. No one had spoken. And yet the sound of her name lingered in the air, low and drawn out, as though carried on a hidden breath. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the book free and climbed down. She hugged it to her chest, moving quickly through the aisles until she reached the open space. Still, her heart refused to settle at lunch. She sat with her friend Mara, who was too distracted with gossip to notice Clara's unease. Mara's voice spilled fast about professors, about parties, about a new student everyone was whispering about. Clara barely listened until Mara leaned closer. Lowering her voice, "Did you hear about Professor Valen?" Clara's hand stilled on her cup. "What about him?" "They say he's cursed." Mara grinned as though it were a joke, but her eyes sparkled with the thrill of rumor. "My roommate swears she saw him in the courtyard last night. Said he wasn't alone. Said there was a wolf with him. Can you imagine? A wolf here." Clara forced a laugh, though it came out thin. "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is," Mara agreed, stabbing at her food. "But still, don't you think he's strange? Always watching people, always knowing things no one tells him." She leaned closer again. "If you want my advice, stay away from him." Clara nodded, but her chest tightened. Mara's warning felt heavier than gossip. The following evening, Clara stayed in the library until closing. She told herself it was to study, but truly, she was listening, waiting for the whisper again. She tried to focus on her notes, but the silence grew too thick, pressing against her ears when the bell rang and the librarian began shooing students out. Clara packed her books and hurried into the hall. The corridor outside was empty. Moonlight spilled through the high windows, painting the floor in pale stripes. She walked quickly, the sound of her footsteps sharp against the stone. Then another sound, soft, steady. A second set of footsteps following her. Clara's chest tightened. She turned her head. The corridor was empty. She swallowed hard, forcing herself forward. But the footsteps continued, always behind, never beside. "Hello?" Her voice echoed off the walls. "Too small, too thin, don't answer." Only silence, stretching too long. Her pulse raced. She hurried down the hall, pushing through the heavy wooden doors into the night air. The courtyard was still, the lamps glowing dimly. When she looked back at the doorway, she saw no one. Yet the feeling remained. She was not alone. By the time she reached her dorm, her nerves were frayed. She closed the door, locked it, and pressed her forehead against the wood. "It's nothing," she told herself. "Just your imagination." She set her books on the desk and tried to breathe. But then she saw it. On her notebook, where she had left it that morning, were new marks. Thin, curved lines scratched into the paper. At first she thought they were doodles she had forgotten making, but when she looked closer, her skin turned cold. They were claw marks, not drawn, cut deep into the page. Tearing through the layers of paper, her stomach twisted. She looked toward the window. It was locked, the curtains drawn. No one could have entered. Yet the marks were real, undeniable. She sank into her chair, clutching the book. Fear crawled across her skin, prickling her arms, her neck, and then a knock, soft, deliberate. At her door, Clara froze. No one visited her at this hour. Mara lived in another building. All the students were in their rooms. Slowly, she turned her head, staring at the wood as if her eyes could pierce through it. Another knock. Louder this time, her throat went dry. She opened her mouth to speak. But before she could, a voice drifted through the door. Low, male, familiar. "Clara, don't be afraid." Her blood turned to ice. It was Professor Vallon. The knock at Clara's door still echoed through the room when she finally found her voice. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. She had heard him clearly. Professor Vallon. His voice was low and steady, but it carried a strange weight that made her heart pound. "Clara," he said again, softer this time. "Open the door." Her pulse raced. Every instinct told her not to. A professor should never be here. It wasn't normal. It wasn't right. And yet, something inside her pulled toward him, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. She turned the lock and pulled the door open. He stood in the dim light of the corridor. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark coat clinging to him as if he had come from the rain, though outside the sky was clear. His black hair fell in untidy waves, and those eyes caught hers instantly. They were too sharp to knowing, glowing faintly like amber caught in firelight. Clara gripped the edge of the door, trying to steady herself. "Professor," she whispered. "Forgive me," he said, his voice low, controlled. "I shouldn't be here, but you need to listen." She nodded, though her throat felt too tight to speak. "I warned you to stay away from Philosophy Hall," he continued. "You didn't listen." Her chest tightened. I saw she stopped herself, unsure if she should say it, but he finished for her. "You saw me." The words hung between them like smoke. Clara's breath caught. She remembered the shadow in the doorway, the eyes, the teeth. Her mind screamed to run, but her body refused. His presence was magnetic, pulling her closer even as danger coiled around him like a second skin. "What are you?" she whispered, though the moment the words left her, she wished she could take them back. His gaze darkened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Only studied her face with a look she couldn't read, half warning, half something deeper. Finally, he spoke. "Something you shouldn't be near." The corridor was silent. Only the faint hum of the old lamps filled the air. Clara's heart hammered so loudly she wondered if he could hear it. "Then why are you here?" she asked, forcing the words out. His jaw tightened. "Because you're already involved. Whether I want you to be or not." The way he said it, like she had been chosen, sent a shiver through her. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, but when she opened her mouth, his eyes caught hers again. They weren't just amber anymore. For a moment, she swore she saw silver, like moonlight trapped inside them. It was impossible to look away. "Close the door," he said quietly. "Before anyone sees." She hesitated, then obeyed, shutting them both inside her small dorm room. The air seemed to shift instantly. The space felt too small, too close, with him standing there. He moved no further, keeping a careful distance, but his presence filled the room all the same. Clara set her books on the desk with shaky hands, trying to mask her nerves. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? Why any of this?" He didn't answer at once. Instead, he looked around the room, his gaze catching on the claw-marked notebook lying on her desk. His expression hardened. "They've already noticed you," he said. "That's why I had to come." "They—" Clara echoed. His eyes flicked back to hers. "The ones who would use you to get to me." She swallowed, her skin prickling. "Why would they care about me?" "You were seen," he said simply. "And now—" He trailed off, his voice lower, more troubled. "Now you're marked." The word struck her like a blow. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. But then she thought of the glowing crescent on her wrist the night in the courtyard. The whispers in the library, the footsteps behind her. "What does it mean?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. His gaze softened just slightly. "It means you're no longer safe." For a long moment, silence wrapped around them. Clara stood frozen, caught between fear and something she couldn't name. Every instinct told her to push him away, to demand that he leave and never return. But instead, she found herself stepping closer. His breath caught so faint, she almost missed it. He turned his face slightly, as if fighting against something. "You shouldn't trust me," he said, his voice rougher now. "Every time you're near me, you're in danger." "Then why don't you leave?" Clara asked. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, the mask slipped. In them, she saw not just power and danger, but longing deep, aching. "It's undeniable." "Because I can't," he admitted. The words sent a tremor through her. Her heart surged with fear, curiosity, and something dangerously close to desire. She told herself it was wrong, forbidden. He was her professor. He was something not entirely human. And yet the air between them hummed like a current, pulling them closer even when they fought against it. Clara stepped back, needing space, needing air. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed softly. "It is." For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm of feelings hung heavy in the room, fear and attraction tangled together. Finally, he turned toward the door. "I'll keep them away," he said. "But you must stay out of the dark places on this campus. Promise me." Clara hesitated. "And if I don't?" His eyes burned as they locked on hers. "Then they'll take you from me." Before she could reply, he opened the door and slipped out into the corridor, his coat brushing the frame as he vanished into the shadows. Clara stood alone in the silence, her heart pounding. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself, but it was no use. The memory of his gaze, the pull of his presence, lingered like a fire under her skin. She didn't know whether to fear him or follow him, and that confusion, that dangerous spark, was the most terrifying. Feeling of all, Clara tried to pretend everything was normal. The morning after Professor Valen left her dorm, she told herself she had imagined half of what happened. Maybe the claw marks were some kind of trick. Maybe the glowing mark on her wrist had been a trick of the moonlight. Maybe his words, "They'll take you from me," were only meant to frighten her. But deep down, she knew better. The world around her no longer felt steady. It was as if the ground she walked on had shifted, and she was waiting for the cracks to open beneath her feet. Classes carried on as usual. Students laughed, professors lectured, and the campus looked just as it always had. Yet Clara noticed things she had never noticed before. Shadows seemed too thick in the corners of the halls. Candles in the philosophy building flickered even when no window was open. Portraits in the library appeared to follow her with their painted eyes, their expressions almost warning. And then there were the accidents. The first happened in the stairwell. Clara was climbing to her lecture when the railing suddenly splintered beneath her hand. She jerked back just in time, her heart leaping into her throat. Shards of wood scattered down the steps, sharp as claws. Students passed without noticing, as if nothing had happened. The second came 2 days later. She was crossing the courtyard when a heavy stone fell from the tower above, smashing into the ground only inches from her. Dust rose into the air, choking her lungs. When she looked up, no one was there. The stone had not been loose. It had been pushed. The third happened in her sleep. That night, Clara dreamed of the courtyard again. Moonlight bathed the stones, but this time the shadowed figure was closer. She saw his face, not Professor Valen, but another man. Pale, sharp, his lips curved in a cruel smile. His eyes were black as night, empty of light or warmth. He reached for her. And when his hand touched her arm, fire shot through her veins. She tried to pull away, but she couldn't move. His voice slithered into her mind, low and cold. "You belong to him. That makes you mine." Clara woke with a cry, her body drenched in sweat, her heart racing. The room was dark, the window rattling in the wind. For a moment, she thought it was only a dream. But then she saw her arm, on the same place where the stranger had touched her. Her skin was red, as though burned up by morning. Clara knew she couldn't pretend anymore. Something was happening to her, something tied to the professor, to the mark on her wrist, to the shadows that now seemed alive. She avoided him in class, sitting in the back row, keeping her eyes on her notebook. But she could feel him. His presence filled the room, pulling her attention like a tide she couldn't resist. When he looked up, their eyes met, and her breath caught. It wasn't fair. He was dangerous, forbidden, impossible. And yet every instinct in her screamed to trust him. When the lecture ended, C slipped out quickly, blending into the crowd. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. That evening, Clara walked to the library again, determined to study and push the thoughts from her mind. The air was heavy, the lamps flickering in and out. She settled at a desk in the corner, surrounding herself with books, trying to anchor herself in normalcy, but it didn't last. A chill ran through the room, making the candles sputter. Pages of her open book fluttered wildly, though no window was open. She looked up and froze. A man stood at the far end of the library. Not a student. Not a professor. His clothes were dark, old-fashioned, almost regal. His skin was pale, and when he smiled, his teeth gleamed too sharp. Her blood turned cold. He was the man from her dream. No one else seemed to see him. Students walked past, oblivious. The librarian carried on stacking books. Yet his eyes locked onto Clara, black and endless, pinning her in place. He took one slow step toward her. Clara shoved back her chair, heart pounding. She grabbed her books, stumbling to her feet, but when she blinked, he was gone. Only the echo of his voice remained, soft as a whisper inside her head. "You can't hide from me." Clara fled the library. She didn't stop running until she reached the courtyard. The night air stung her lungs, her hands shaking as she clutched her books to her chest. She spun in every direction, searching the shadows. And then she saw him. Not the pale man, but Professor Valen. He stood at the edge of the courtyard, his coat swirling in the wind, his gaze locked on her. There was no mask this time, no pretense of being ordinary. His eyes glowed faintly, silver and amber both, reflecting the moonlight. "Clara," he called, his voice low but sharp, carrying across the empty courtyard. "Behind you?" Her breath caught. She turned and her blood froze. From the darkness of the archway, two figures stepped forward. Pale, silent, their eyes black as glass. Their movements were too smooth, too quiet. She knew instantly they were not human. The same whisper from her dream filled the air. "Ken? Mine?" Clara stumbled backward, her body screaming with terror. The books fell from her hands, pages scattering across the wet stones. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy, weak. Professor Valen moved before she could. His body blurred, too fast, too sharp, like the air itself bent to his speed. In an instant, he was between her and the intruders. His form taller, broader, his stance predatory. "Stay behind me," he growled. His voice no longer entirely human. The vampire smiled. And Clara understood in that chilling moment. Her world would never be ordinary again. The night in the courtyard had changed everything. Clara could not unsee the way. Professor Valen had moved. Too fast, too fierce, shielding her from the figures with black eyes. She could not unhear the growl that rumbled from his chest. A sound no human throat could make. But more than anything, she could not forget the way he had looked at her afterward. Not as a teacher looks at a student, but as if her very heartbeat mattered to him. And yet, when morning came, life on campus looked the same. Students rushed to classes, the bells chimed, books opened and closed. It would have been easy to believe nothing unusual had happened, if not for the mark still faintly glowing on her wrist. Clara avoided him for as long as she could. She sat at the back of lectures, kept her head down, tried to blend into the chatter of her classmates. But it was useless. She felt his presence even without looking. When he wrote on the board, she could sense his gaze flick toward her. When he spoke, his voice seemed to echo inside her chest, making her heart race. And when she dared to glance up, their eyes would meet, pulling her in like a tide she could not resist. One evening, as the lecture hall emptied, Clara stayed behind to gather her notes. Her hands shook so badly she dropped half her papers. As she bent to pick them up, a shadow fell over her. "Clara!" His voice was soft but heavy with meaning. She looked up and saw Professor Valen standing close, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't walk alone at night," he said. "Not anymore." She swallowed hard. "Because of them." A flicker of something crossed his face. Anger, maybe sorrow. "Because of what hunts in the dark. You saw enough to know it's real." She wanted to ask what he was, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded, hugging her books to her chest. He stepped back, giving her space. Yet his eyes lingered, warm and sharp all at once. "Let me walk you." They crossed the courtyard together. The air was cool, and the lamps flickered as the wind stirred the trees. Clara kept her gaze ahead, but she was too aware of him how tall he stood, how his coat brushed against her sleeve, how every movement felt deliberate. "Protective, those men," she finally whispered. "The ones in the library." "What were they?" "Not men," he said. "Vampires." The word chilled her. It sounded like something out of a book. Not something to be spoken beneath the night sky. "And you stopped them," she said slowly. "You fought them off." His jaw tightened. For now, there was more he wasn't saying. Clara could feel it. The silence stretched, heavy with things unsaid. "Why me?" she asked at last. "Why are they after me?" He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw not just the professor, but the man beneath, the one who carried secrets too heavy too. "Cheer, because you matter," he said simply. Her breath caught. The words should not have meant so much, and yet they sank into her like a flame. From that night on, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes she found him waiting outside her lecture hall. Sometimes he appeared in the library when the lights dimmed, his coat brushing the floor, his gaze fixed on her dot. At first, their conversations were cautious. He spoke in riddles, warning her without explaining. But slowly, Clara began to see the cracks in his guarded walls. When she asked about the mark on her wrist, he admitted it was not random. "It is a bond," he said quietly. "It ties you to this world whether you want it or not." When she pressed further, asking why he had chosen her, he hesitated before answering. "Because I couldn't let them take you." His words carried weight, too much weight. They were not just about danger, they were about her. The tension, ruined small ways. The brush of his hand as he passed her a book. The way his voice lowered when he spoke only to her. The rare smile that curved his lips, gone as quickly as it came. One evening, as rain poured outside, she stayed late in the library. He appeared at her table, placing a candle beside her notes. "You'll ruin your eyes in the dark," he said. His tone almost gentle. Clara met his gaze, her heart pounding. "You always find me," she whispered. "I have too," he replied. For a long moment, they did not speak. The storm rattled the windows, thunder shaking the glass. Yet the silence between them was louder than the storm. Her hand moved without thought, brushing against his. Heat shot through her skin, and she drew back quickly, cheeks burning. But his eyes softened, and in them she saw not just danger, but longing. Still, fear lingered. Clara knew this bond was forbidden. He was her professor, her protector, and something more than human. Whatever drew them together was as dangerous as it was magnetic. She told herself she must resist. And yet every time she heard his voice, every time she felt his presence, the resistance crumbled. One night, unable to sleep, Clara wandered the halls of the philosophy building. The lamps burned low, the corridors hushed. She turned a corner and froze. The door to his office stood open. Inside, Professor Valen was not alone. Clara stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. Through the crack in the door, she saw him kneeling on the floor, his head bowed, his hand pressed to the stone. Symbols glowed faintly beneath his palm-ancient markings, pulsing with silver light. His shoulders rose and fell with a strange, heavy rhythm, as if he were holding back something powerful, something dangerous. And then he lifted his head, and for the first time, Clara saw his eyes fully change. They glowed bright silver, sharp and wild, not human at all. His lips parted, and his teeth lengthened into fangs wolfish, lethal. Clara's breath caught. She stumbled back, her hand clamping over her mouth. Professor Valen was no ordinary man. He was the very thing she had feared, the thing she could not resist, a creature caught between worlds. Clara could not breathe. The sight of him kneeling on the stone floor, eyes glowing silver, teeth sharp as blades, burned into her mind. It was no dream, no trick of the light. Professor Valen was not human. She stumbled back, the floorboards creaking under her shoes. The sound broke the silence. His head snapped toward her. The glow in his eyes flared brighter, catching her like a moth in flame. For a long, heavy moment, neither of them moved. The air between them thickened, filled with something more than fear, something alive, pulsing, magnetic. "Clara," he said, his voice low, rough, not quite his own. Her heart thundered. "What? What are you?" He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, careful, as if afraid to scare her further. His face was half shadow, half silver light, the sharp lines of a predator carved into his features. "I told you," he murmured, "that you shouldn't see this. But I did," she whispered, pressing herself against the wall. "I saw everything." He took a step closer, then stopped, holding his distance. His breathing was uneven, as though he fought against something inside himself. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he said. "Try me." His lips curved, not a smile, not exactly. More like sorrow. "I am cursed. A soul divided. Neither wolf nor man. Not fully vampire either. Bound between worlds. Hunted by both." Clara shook her head, her thoughts spinning. "That's not possible." "Do you think so?" He lifted his hand. The symbols on the floor glowed again, pale silver light spreading in veins across the stone. The air shivered. The marks on her wrist burned faintly in answer. She gasped, clutching her arm. "It's connected." "Yes," he said, his voice tightening. "Because I couldn't stop it. The night they came for you, I let the bond take root. You should hate me for that." Hate him. No, that wasn't what she felt. Her chest swirled with too many things at once: fear, confusion, but also something deeper, something she didn't dare name. "Why me?" she asked softly. His gaze locked onto hers, fierce and unguarded. "Because you saw me. Because you didn't run when you should have. Because fate is cruel. And He stopped, clenching his jaw, forcing the words down. Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to step forward, to ask more, but her body wouldn't move. His presence was overwhelming, like standing on the edge of a storm. She whispered, "Saved me." For the first time, something fragile flickered in his eyes. "And I would again. But don't mistake that for kindness. It only means you are caught in this with me." A sharp noise cut through the wall. Air, the sound of glass breaking. Clara startled. Valen turned sharply toward the window. The lamps flickered, shadows stretching across the walls. For a second, she thought she saw a figure outside, pale and still, watching. "Stay behind me," he said quickly. He moved with speed that made her breath catch, coat swirling. Body tense, every line of him ready for attack. But when he flung the window open, the courtyard below was empty. Only the rain dripped from the roof, pooling on the stones. Clara's fear grew sharper. They weren't alone. He shut the window with a slam, turning back to her. Do you understand now? Why I told you to stay away? Her hands trembled around her books. You're telling me to be afraid of them, but I think I should be afraid of you. His face hardened, pain flashing across his features. For a moment, he looked less like a creature and more like a man who had been carrying loneliness for centuries. Perhaps you should, he said. Quietly, silence filled the office. The glow in his eyes faded slowly, though not completely. Clara could still see it, light buried beneath shadow, never fully gone. Go back to your room, he said at last. Forget this night. Forget me. Her chest tightened. Forget. As if she could, she shook her head. You think I can walk away after what I've seen? After what I've felt? His jaw tightened, his voice low and urgent. If you don't, they will come for you. And if they don't... He stopped, his gaze heavy. I might. The words struck her harder than any threat. She wanted to believe he wouldn't hurt her, but could she? The next days were a blur. Clara tried to keep her life normal, but every sound felt sharper, every shadow too deep. She saw faces in the crowd that lingered too long, eyes too cold. Sometimes she felt footsteps behind her, though no one was there, and always she felt him, watching from the edges of her days. Protecting her, maybe studying her. Their bond pulsed whenever he was near. A brush of heat across her skin, a faint tug in her chest. Sometimes she caught him in the library, staring at her with an expression she couldn't name. Sometimes in lectures, his voice faltered when he looked her way. It was a thread pulling them closer. No matter how hard she tried to fight it, one evening, Clara sat alone beneath the old oak in the courtyard, clutching her notebook. She thought she was alone until she heard footsteps. Valen stood before her, his coat dark in the twilight, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't sit here at night, he said. Then stop finding me, she answered. Her voice trembling, something flickered in his gaze, anger, maybe longing. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat against her skin. Do you think I want this? He asked, voice low. Do you think I chose to be tied to you? Clara's chest ached. Then why save me at all? His hand twitched at his side as though he wanted to reach for her but forced himself not to. Because, his words broke, caught between confession and denial. Because you're already mine. Her breath stopped. The world around them seemed to vanish, leaving only his words hanging in the air. And then she saw it, the faint outline of a scar beneath his collar. Glowing faintly silver like the mark on her wrist. It pulsed once, in time with her own heartbeat. Her stomach turned cold. You marked me, she whispered. His silence was answer enough. You didn't give me a choice, she said. Standing Toyne shadowed his face, but he didn't deny it. I couldn't. If I hadn't, you would be dead. Her chest tightened with betrayal. He had saved her, yes, but he had also bound her to him, stolen her freedom without asking. Clara, his voice was raw, desperate. But she stepped back. How can I trust you when you already decided for me? The bond between them burned hotter, pulling her even as she pulled away. Her heart screamed for him, but her mind whispered danger. For the first time since she'd met him, Clara turned and left, leaving him standing in the shadows, his silver eyes glowing with something that looked too much like regret. Clara tried to keep her distance. She told herself not to seek him out, not to look for him in the halls, not to let her heart answer the bond that pulsed beneath her skin. But the mark on her wrist betrayed her every time. It warmed when he drew near, burned when he was gone too long. It was as if her body had chosen him. Even while her mind screamed to resist, and Professor Elias was always near. She saw him at the edges of the library stacks, his figure half in shadow. She felt his eyes on her when she crossed the courtyard, when she sat beneath the oak, when she pretended to listen in class. He did not touch her, did not speak unless he had to. But the silence between them hummed with words unsaid. Clara thought she could bear it until the night the danger returned. It was late, and the corridors of the philosophy building stretched long and empty. She had stayed behind to finish an essay, and the candles were burning low. As she gathered her papers, she heard footsteps too light, too deliberate. Not the shuffle of a tired student. She froze, listening. The air grew colder. The lamps flickered. When she turned, a man stood at the end of the hall. Pale, elegant, dressed in dark velvet. His eyes glowed like shards of ice. Clara's heart seized. She knew what he was even before his lips pulled back to show sharp white. "Teeth! Found you!" the vampire hissed. Her legs moved before her mind caught up. She ran, papers scattering across the floor. Her shoes pounded against the stone, the echo chasing her down the hall. The vampire was faster. She heard him closing in, the hiss of his breath, the scrape of claws against the wall, and then a shadow swept past her. Elias, he, struck the vampire with a force that shook the air, throwing him against the wall. The impact cracked stone. Elias's eyes glowed silver, his teeth bared. A growl tearing from his throat. Clara stopped, pressed against the wall. Her breath coming in, gasps. The vampire laughed, blood running from his mouth. "Still protecting her? You can't keep her forever, half-breed. She burned for your sins." Elias silenced him with a blow so fierce, Clara turned her head. When she looked back, the vampire was gone, disappeared into mist. His laughter echoing long after. Silence returned, broken only by Clara's racing heartbeat. Elias turned to her. His face was still half-off, his chest rising with heavy breaths. The sight should have terrified her. Instead, she felt drawn, as if the very danger in him called to something buried inside her. "You're hurt," he said, stepping toward her. His voice was rough, strained, but gentler than the storm in his body. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her hands shook. His eyes softened, the silver fading. "You shouldn't have been alone." Her chest tightened. "You can't always be there." Something flickered across his face. Fear, guilt, longing. "I have to be." In the days that followed, Clara could not push him from her thoughts. The vampire's words haunted her. Half-breed scenes forever. She wanted to ask Elias what they meant, but every time she opened her mouth, the weight of the bond stopped her. He saved her again that week, once from a shadowy figure outside her dorm, once from a door that slammed shut when no wind blew. Each time he appeared like he had been waiting, as if nothing in the world mattered except her safety. And each time, the space between them grew thinner. One evening, Clara found him in the library, standing before the tall windows as rain streaked the glass. He didn't move when she approached, only spoke without turning. "You should hate me." She stopped, startled. "Why would you say that?" "Because I tied you to this life. Because I made you part of a war you don't understand." His voice cracked. "Because the closer you are to me, the more they will come for you." Clara stepped nearer, her pulse loud in her ears. "Then why keep saving me?" Finally, he turned. His eyes glowed faintly, not with rage, but with a sorrow so deep it made her chest ache. "Because I can't stop," he said simply. Their gazes locked. The silence between them felt alive, heavy with words neither dared to speak. Clara's hand trembled. She wanted to reach out, to touch his arm, to prove he was real. But before she could, a sound shattered the moment. Glass broke in the far corner. A book fell from a shelf. Elias moved instantly, pulling Clara behind him. His eyes sharpened, his shoulders tense. From the shadows stepped another figure. A woman this time, tall and pale, with hair black as midnight. She wore a smile sharp as glass. Well, the vampire woman purred. The professor's pet. Clara's blood ran cold. Elias bared his teeth. "Leave her." The woman's laugh echoed across the shelves. "Oh, Elias, always protecting what you can't keep. Do you think she'll stay once she knows what you are?" Her eyes slid to Clara, gleaming. "Do you think she'll forgive you for the lives you've taken?" Clara's breath hitched. She looked at Elias, searching his face. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The vampire's laughter faded as she melted back into shadow, leaving only silence behind. Clara's heart hammered. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias did not answer. His silence was worse than denial. "You've killed," she said, her voice breaking. His eyes closed for a moment as if the weight of centuries pressed on him. When he opened them again, silver light burned within. "I've done what I had to survive, to keep others safe. But yes, my hands are not clean." Clara staggered back, her mind spinning. Fear, longing, betrayal, they clashed inside her, tearing her apart. He stepped forward, reaching for her, but she lifted her hand, stopping him. The mark on her wrist burned, pulling her toward him even as her body screamed to run. "Clara," his voice was raw, desperate. Her chest heaved. Every part of her ached for him, even now. But the vampire's words echoed inside her. "Do you think she'll stay?" She had to choose. Pull away and maybe save herself, or surrender to destiny. And risk being destroyed by it. The silence stretched, her heart pounding in her ears. And then she took a step closer. The night was colder than any Eleanor remembered in Cambridge. A wind pressed against the windows of her small apartment, carrying with it a sound almost like voices. She wrapped herself in a blanket, but no warmth reached her. All day. She had tried to push away what she had seen in the courtyard, the way Adrian's eyes had glowed faintly, the shadows bending around him like loyal servants. She wanted to believe it was her imagination. Yet every clock ticked louder, every light seemed dimmer. And she knew her life had crossed into something she could not explain away. When she closed her eyes, she saw him. His voice echoed deep and low. "You were never meant to stay in the ordinary world." Those words had not been spoken. Yet she felt them inside her the next morning. Eleanor carried her books to class with trembling hands. She walked past the stone walls of the old university, the ivy climbing like green veins over gray skin. Students hurried around her, laughing, rushing, but their voices sounded distant, muffled, as if she had stepped into another layer of reality. In the middle of the library staircase, she stopped. On the wall above the arch was a carving she had never noticed before, a wolf and a bat locked in battle. Their bodies twisted together like enemies and lovers. Beneath them, a Latin phrase, sanguis meminat. She didn't know Latin, but the words burned in her mind until she whispered them aloud. "Blood, remembers." Her hand shook as she traced the letters. Why had she never seen this before? That evening, Eleanor found herself outside Professor Adrian Blackwood's office again. She had not planned it. Her feet had carried her without thought. The door was closed, but light glowed beneath it. She raised her hand, then froze when she heard voices inside. One was Adrian's, calm, smooth but edged with tension. The other was rougher, lower, a growl hiding inside human words. "She doesn't know," Adrian said. "She must be told," the other voice answered. "Or the bloodline will awaken without guidance. Do you want another tragedy?" Eleanor pressed herself to the wall, heart racing. Bloodline? Were they speaking about her? Adrian's voice grew sharper. "Not yet. If she learns too soon, it could break her." Her knees went weak. She almost stumbled into the door, but the voices went silent. For a moment, she thought Adrian had scented her fear. She ran. Dreams came that night dark, heavy, filled with smoke and cries. She stood in a forest lit by silver moonlight. A woman stood across from her, tall, dressed in old clothes. Her hair dark like Eleanor's. The woman's eyes glowed golden, wolf-like. But her smile was gentle. "You carry us within you," the woman whispered. "Do not fear what you are." The ground shook. From behind the trees, shadows rose-winged, sharp with red eyes like burning coals. The woman reached toward Eleanor, but before their hands touched, a hiss of fire cut the dream apart. Eleanor woke with tears on her face. Her pillow was wet, though she did not remember crying. She went searching for answers. In the hidden section of the library, the one behind a locked gate she had never dared to pass, she found an old book, half buried in dust. The cover bore the same carving she had seen, the wolf and the bat entwined. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The pages told of an ancient pact between two lines, the wolves and the vampires. Enemies, yet bound by prophecy. The text spoke of a child born from one line but carrying the blood of both. A bridge, a danger, a hope. Eleanor's breath caught when she saw the family crest drawn on one page, a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon. She knew that crest. It was carved into the ring her grandmother had always worn. The same ring that now rested in Eleanor's jewelry box at home. Her chest tightened. This was her family. Adrian appeared that night outside her apartment. She opened the door to find him standing in the rain, his dark coat clinging to him. His face shadowed, but his eyes burning with a strange light. "You shouldn't be out here," she whispered. "I had to come," he said softly. "You felt it, haven't you? The dreams, the voices, the pull." She wanted to deny it, to slam the door, but her lips parted with the truth. "What am I?" For the first time, Adrian looked almost afraid. "You are the key, the last of your line, both wolf and bloodborne. That is why I could never stay away from you." Her knees weakened. She held on to the doorframe. "That's not possible. My family was ordinary." "No," he said, stepping closer. "Your family was hunted, hidden, protected, until now the ground beneath them shook." Somewhere in the distance, a howl split the night air long, furious, filled with pain. Adrian's face darkened. "They've found you," he whispered. "Who?" Eleanor's voice broke. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her hand, his skin cold against hers. "You must trust me, or you will not live through what comes." Before she could reply, a shadow passed across the window behind him. Red eyes glowed in the dark. Eleanor's world shattered in that moment. She thought she understood fear before, but this was different. Her very blood seemed to tremble, pulling her between fight and surrender. Adrian pushed her behind him. "Stay inside," he commanded. His voice edged with something not human. Her eyes widened as his shadow stretched across the floor, changing shape, part man, part beast, the lines of wolf and bat flickering like fire. She gasped. "You're not." "I am both," he said, without shame. "And so are you." Her breath stopped. Her heart thundered. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. In the distance, the howl came again. Closer this time. Adrian turned toward the window, his jaw tight, his body tense like a predator ready to strike. Eleanor pressed a hand against her chest. But she could not calm the storm inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt something awake and hot, fierce. Ancient daughter eyes lifted to the glass. For a second, she swore she saw them glow back at the red gaze. Outside, and she knew Adrian was not lying. The blood in her veins was not ordinary. It was cursed. It was chosen. It was hers. And the world would never be the same again. The night swallowed the city, quiet except for the echo of distant bells. Eleanor stood frozen in her apartment doorway, Adrian's hand gripping hers with cold urgency. The truth of her blood had burned into her, and though she wanted to deny it, every beat of her heart agreed with him. She was not ordinary. She never had been. But if that was true, then what was hunting her now? The red eyes in the window flashed again. A figure stepped from the shadows outside, tall, cloaked, with movements too smooth to be human. The rein slid from its shoulders as if afraid to touch it. Adrian's voice dropped to a growl. "Stay behind me." Eleanor wanted to obey, but her legs trembled with a strength that wasn't her own. A heat surged inside her, like a fire begging to be released. Her grandmother's face filled her mind, her old warnings echoing. "You are not like them. Never forget it." The intruder spoke, his voice dry like stone. "So it's true. The blood has awakened." Adrian moved between Eleanor and the shadow, his shoulders tense, his frame larger than she remembered. "You shouldn't be here. You cannot keep her," the figure said. "The council knows what she is. They will come." Eleanor's stomach nodded. Council, who were they? Why did they want her? Adrian lunged forward. In the blink of an eye, the figure dissolved into mist, then reformed a dozen steps away. Its red eyes glared at Eleanor with hunger. Her chest tightened. For a heartbeat, she felt as if invisible hands reached for her throat. She gasped, stumbling back. Adrian roared, the sound shaking the glass panes. And the figure melted into the night. Silence fell. Heavy and suffocating. Eleanor gripped the doorframe, her breath uneven. What was that? Adrian turned, his eyes still glowing faintly, his jaw locked. A warning, and a promise. They won't stop until they have you. The days that followed blurred into unease. Eleanor couldn't walk through the campus without feeling eyes on her. Every shadow seemed thicker, every sound sharper. Adrian hovered near, sometimes visible, sometimes not, but always close enough that she felt him. It should have comforted her. But doubt had begun to creep in. He had known about her family, her bloodline, long before she did. He had spoken of destiny and prophecy, yet never told her what she was until the danger was already at her door. If he could hide that, what else was he hiding? One evening, as Eleanor sat alone in the library's quiet hall, she overheard two students whispering. Their voices were sharp, urgent. They say the professor is cursed. Cursed. Yes, that's why he never ages. My aunt studied here 20 years ago, said he looked the same. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She wanted to defend him, to say they were wrong. But hadn't she seen the same truth in his eyes? Hadn't she felt the centuries in his voice? Her trust in him wavered, fragile as glass dot. Later that night, Adrian appeared again at her door. His face was strained, his shirt torn as if from a fight. "You're not safe here," he said. "We need to leave." Leave. Eleanor repeated, fear rising. "Where?" "Somewhere the council cannot reach you." She shook her head. "You keep saying their name, but you never explain." "Who are they, Adrian? What do they want with me?" His silence was heavy. Finally he said, "They fear what you are. They fear what you could become. To them, you are either a weapon or a threat that must be destroyed." Her chest tightened. "And what am I to you?" For the first time, his face softened, almost broken. "To me, you are the only thing that matters." Her heart leaped at the words, but doubt tangled it. Could she believe him? Before she could ask again, a crash shook the windows. Eleanor spun toward the sound. A shadow burst through the glass, shards flying. She screamed as a figure lunged, tall and monstrous, its eyes burning red. Adrian moved fast, pulling her behind him. His body shifted, his outline rippling into something not quite human. Fangs, glinted claws shone. He met the intruder in a violent clash. The sound of bone and steel echoing in the room. Eleanor ducked low, her arms covering her head as the fight raged. But even through fear, she felt the heat in her veins again. Her blood seemed to answer the chaos, humming, glowing faintly beneath her skin. "Run!" Adrian roared. But Eleanor couldn't. She was rooted, her heart splitting between fear and fury. The attacker's hand shot forward, faster than thought, and struck Adrian across the chest. Adrian staggered, blood staining his shirt. Eleanor gasped, rushing toward him. But the shadow grabbed her wrist with a grip of iron. "Let me go!" She cried, twisting, but the heat inside her flared. Her vision blurred, and for a brief second, she saw her arms shimmered not skin, not flesh, but fur, silver and glowing beneath the moonlight. The attacker hissed and released her. Eleanor stumbled back, shaking, staring at her hand. It was human again, but she had seen it. She knew. Adrian growled, forcing himself to his feet, his fangs bared. "Touch her again, and you will regret it." The intruder laughed, low and cruel. "She's already changing. You can't hide it much longer." Then he vanished into smoke, leaving only the shattered glass and the taste of dread. Eleanor knelt beside Adrian, panic in her chest. His wound was deep, blood seeping through his shirt. "Don't move," she whispered. He caught her wrist, his grip weak but firm. "You saw it, didn't you? The truth inside you." Tears blurred her vision. "What's happening to me?" "You're awakening," he said softly. "And once it begins, it cannot be stopped." She wanted to deny it, to run, to undo every moment that had led her here. But the warmth in her blood, the memory of her hand glowing like silver fire, told her there was no turning back. Her life was no longer her own. And Adrian, the man she was drawn to, the man who bled for her, was now in more danger than ever because of it. Eleanor pressed her hand against his wound, trembling. "Stay with me, please." His eyes, still glowing faintly, locked on hers. "I will, as long as you let me." But outside, in the darkness, more shadows gathered. Their whispers carried through the night like the hiss of snakes. Eleanor felt it in her bones. This was only the beginning. The wind tore through Cambridge like it had a mind of its own, rattling windows and scattering papers along the cobblestones. Eleanor ran through the empty streets, her breath ragged, her heart pounding. The streets felt unfamiliar, as if the city itself had shifted into some darker version of itself. Every shadow seemed to move. Every echo whispered threats. Behind her, Adrian's voice carried, sharp and commanding. "Eleanor, stop. You're running toward them." But she couldn't stop. She couldn't think. Every instinct inside her screamed to flee, yet her blood glowing faintly beneath her skin pulled her forward. She had been running from this night her entire life, and now there was nowhere to hide. The alley opened into the courtyard of an abandoned manor, moonlight streaking across broken windows and toppled columns. Eleanor stopped at the center, heart hammering. There were too many of them. Figures draped in shadow, eyes glowing red. Surrounding her on all sides, Adrian stepped beside her, his coat torn, his fangs bared, claws glinting in silver light. The air around him shimmered, alive with power. Yet Eleanor noticed something else, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a tension that hadn't been there before. "You don't have to do this." "Alone," he said. "I can't hide anymore," she whispered. "I'm not ordinary. I never was. I have to face it." Before Adrian could respond, the shadows lunged. They moved faster than thought, attacking like a wave of fire and steel. Eleanor felt a tug in her chest, the bond pulling her toward Adrian even as her own powers surged to life. Silver light burst from her hands, forming a shield just as the first of the shadow figures struck. The collision knocked her backward, scraping her across the stones. Pain flared, but she refused to scream. The wind carried a hiss, a cruel, mocking sound. One of the attackers circled, glowing eyes fixed on her like a predator sizing up its prey. Adrian met the figure head-on, claws flashing. They fought with a speed and strength Eleanor had never seen, a blur of movement that left sparks in the air. Yet every time Adrian struck, more shadows appeared. It was endless. Eleanor stumbled to her feet, clutching her arms. Her blood burned hotter, warning her that her powers were awakening beyond control. She looked at Adrian. He was still fighting, still protecting her, but there was a weight in his eyes, a shadow she hadn't seen before. "Adrian," she called, trying to reach him through the chaos. He froze for a split second, turning toward her. That hesitation was all the shadow needed. One leaped, claws extended. Adrian shouted, deflecting it, but the blow grazed him. Blood ran down his arm, and Eleanor's heart leaped. "I can't lose you," she cried, fear cutting through her voice. He looked at her, his eyes glowing silver with a mix of anger and something darker, something she had never seen before. "Then you need to listen to me, now." Before she could ask what he meant, a whisper cut across the courtyard. A voice she recognized from her dreams, low and cold. "Choose, child. Love him or survive." The words froze her blood. She turned. Across the courtyard, standing on a broken balcony, was a figure cloaked in shadow, their eyes glowing with cruel amusement. "Survive," Eleanor repeated, her hands trembling. What? What do you mean?" The figure laughed, the sound like ice cracking. "Your heart is your weakness, and your blood is your gift. Choose one, either walk away from him and live, or stay and risk everything." Her chest tightened. The bond pulsed violently against her skin. She felt Adrian behind her, every heartbeat synchronized with hers. Adrian stepped forward, fangs glinting in the moonlight. "Eleanor, whatever they say, whatever they promise, don't listen. The choice is ours together." But the shadow figure spoke again, more urgently. He cannot protect you forever. One choice now, and the consequences will follow you for all time. Eleanor's mind spun. Every memory, every moment she had shared with Adrian flashed before her. His protection, his words, his eyes glowing in the library when he first confessed he couldn't stay away. And now the thought of losing him, of leaving him behind, was unbearable. Yet, the shadows were closing in, faster, unrelenting. She could see the fear in Adrian's eyes, the tension of centuries weighing on him. Even he could not fight them all. She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling. Her powers hummed, silver light flaring along her veins. She could feel it power enough to fight, power enough to protect herself, but not enough to save them both. Her breath hitched. I can't," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Adrian stepped closer, placing a hand on her cheek. "Whatever you decide, Eleanor, I trust you. But don't hide from me now. Not ever." Her heart ached, her body shaking. Every instinct told her to pull back, to survive. But every beat of her blood, every flicker of silver, every whisper of their bond pulled her forward. She closed her eyes and let herself feel at the bond, the connection, the truth of their hearts. A sudden attack cut through her thoughts. A shadow lunged from the side and Adrian roared, moving in front of her. The force of the blow knocked him off his feet. Eleanor screamed, rushing to him. He grabbed her hand just in time, holding her steady. But the shadow slipped past them both. Adrian's fangs glinted in the moonlight as he growled low. "This ends now." He surged forward, transforming more fully. His body shimmered with wolf and bat-like traits, claws extended, fangs bared. Eleanor felt the pull of his power, the surge of hers answering his. Together, their bond flared like fire and silver for a heartbeat. She believed they could fight them all. Then a terrible truth hit her. The shadow figure from the balcony moved faster than anything else she had seen, and in a single motion grabbed Adrian from behind, dragging him toward the edge of the broken balcony. "No!" Eleanor screamed, rushing forward, but her powers surged uncontrollably, spilling in all directions. The shadows hissed and fled from the brightness, but the balcony cracked under the weight. Adrian struggled, his hands gripping hers for a final second. His eyes met hers, pleading, desperate, filled with something she couldn't name. "Eleanor, choose, survive, or stay." He gasped, the edge of the balcony giving way beneath them. Her chest ached. Her heart screamed to pull him back, to save him. But the shadow figure's hand wrapped around him, stronger than steel. Dragging him toward the void, Eleanor's powers flared. Silver light spilling in a storm around her. But she realized she could not save him without risking herself completely. Her mind split in two. Survive. Or love. The balcony crumbled. Adrian's body fell, shadows swallowing him, and Eleanor screamed his name. The wind roared. Silver fire exploded from her veins, but it was too late. He was gone into the dark, into the unknown. And her choice, whatever it had been, had not saved him. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, rain pelting her face. Her chest heaved, her blood screamed, and for the first time, she understood the full weight of what her bond truly meant. He had been her choice, and now the world had taken him. Eleanor stood at the edge of the cliff, wind whipping her hair, rain soaking her clothes. Below, the river churned like boiling silver, catching the moonlight in streaks of light and shadow. Her hands shook, trembling with fear and power, but she could not step back. Not now. Not when everything she loved depended on her. Adrian had been taken, pulled into the dark by the Council's shadow agents. The bond between them pulsed in her veins, sharp and hot. It cried out to her, guiding her, commanding her. She had never felt anything so overwhelming and so terrifying, Eleanor. His voice rang in her mind, distant but real. "You have to choose. You can save me, or lose yourself." Her chest ached. She wanted to close her eyes, to run, to leave the darkness behind. But the bloodline inside her, the legacy she had discovered, The prophecy whispered in old books and carved walls, all of it demanded that she face this. She stepped forward. The chamber below the cliff was a ruined cathedral, its arches blackened by fire, stone cracked in bleeding shadows. The council waited, their eyes glowing red, robes flaring like living smoke. Adrian was kneeling at the center, bound in chains that glimmered with silver runes, his head bowed. Eleanor's breath caught. Every instinct told her to rush forward. But every voice in her mind, hers and Adrian's, warned. This was not ordinary danger. One wrong move, and everything would be lost. The head of the council, tall and skeletal, stepped forward, eyes glowing brighter than the rest. "So the child of wolf and blood returns," he hissed. "Do you understand what this means?" Eleanor felt the weight of centuries in his gaze. I don't care what you want," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm taking him back." The council laughed, a sound that made her teeth ache. "You alone. Against us." She looked at Adrian. His eyes met hers, silver glowing faintly even behind the chains. "You can do this, Eleanor," he whispered in her mind. "I trust you." Her heart surged. She raised her hands. The blood in her veins flared, silver light spilling in waves like a storm. Shadows screamed as her power pulsed outward. She felt her wolf side awaken fully, felt the bat-born fire flare inside her. The battle began. Council members attacked in waves. But Eleanor was faster, stronger than anything they expected. Silver light surged from her fists, knocking opponents back. Shadows shrieked as she moved, her anger and love combining into a force no ordinary magic could match. 1. Council agent lunged with a dagger tipped in silver, aiming for her heart. She caught it midair, twisting it with strength she didn't know she had, and flung it into the stone wall. Adrian roared from his chains, and Eleanor's heart broke. The sound ignited something deeper inside her. She surged forward, moving toward him even as more enemies rose from the shadows. But then she saw him. The council had his eyes fixed on her, a cruel smile on his pale face. "So much fire," he whispered, "and yet so fragile. Will you risk everything for love?" Fear struck her like a blade. She remembered everything, the shadows chasing her, Adrian's warnings, the prophecy. She realized then the cost of failure. If she hesitated, if she faltered, Adrian would die. Her hands glowed brighter. I do it for him," she shouted. A blinding silver light exploded from her body, knocking every council member backward. Stone-cracked shadows scattered, the wind screaming around the ruined cathedral. Chains holding Adrian shattered as the light washed over him. He fell to his knees, coughing but alive. She ran to him, taking his hands in hers. "Eleanor." He gasped, eyes wide, glimmering with emotion. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you." But their relief was short-lived. The council head stepped forward, his form twisting, revealing his true nature, a monstrous hybrid of bat and shadow, wings flaring, claws gleaming. "Do you think your love can protect you?" he hissed. "Do you think this bond is stronger than destiny?" Eleanor felt her heart pound, the fear rising like a wave ready to drown her. But she did not step back. She raised her hands, letting every ounce of power flow into one final attack. The energy crackled like lightning, silver and fierce. She felt the wolf, the blood-born fire, the bond with Adrian, all of it merging into a single unstoppable force. They collided, the council heads. Darkness and her light shaking the ruins, tearing the cathedral apart. Shadows screamed. Stone fell. The wind became a hurricane. Adrian wrapped his arms around her waist, grounding her, lending his strength to hers. Together they became a single storm of light and fury. Time seemed to freeze. Then, with a final cry, Eleanor hurled all her power at the council head. His scream echoed, sharp and terrible, as silver light consumed him. When the smoke cleared, he was gone. Only scorched stone remained. Eleanor sank to her knees, trembling, the light fading from her veins. Adrian held her, chest heaving, his silver eyes softening. "You did it," he whispered. I think so, she gasped. Her body ached, her magic spent, her soul trembling from the storm. For a heartbeat, they believed it was over. But then Eleanor noticed movement in the shadows. A figure stepped forward slowly, familiar and horrifying. It was her grandmother's, glowing faintly, her expression unreadable. "Eleanor," she said, voice trembling but firm, "the council is defeated. For now, but there is a price. You are awake. The prophecy is real. And your blood, it has changed you." Eleanor looked down at her hands, still faintly glowing with residual power. "Changed me?" "Yes," her grandmother said. "Forever. You are no longer just a girl caught in a hidden world. You are a bridge, Eleanor. You carry both wolf and bloodborne fire. And soon you will be hunted not just by them, but by those who fear your power." Adrian pulled her close, but the words hung heavy between them. "We survived," he whispered. "But what now?" Her grandmother shook her head. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over. And some sacrifices have yet to be paid." Eleanor's chest tightened. She looked at Adrian, love and fear intermingling, and realized that even victory had come at a cost. The bond had strengthened, but the danger had not vanished. Her powers pulsed, silver light faintly glowing in the night. She felt different, stronger, but scarred. And deep inside, a chill whispered, this was only the beginning. The wind howled. Rain fell harder. And somewhere in the darkness, new shadows were stirring, watching, waiting. Dawn broke over Cambridge, painting the sky in pale gold and soft pink. The rain from the night before had washed the city clean, leaving the streets glistening, quiet, almost peaceful. But Eleanor knew that the world she had returned to was not the same. She was not the same. She walked through the courtyard of the ruined cathedral. Now silent except for the distant coo of pigeons and the trickle of water over broken stones. Her hands still tingled faintly with residual silver energy. A reminder that the blood inside her Wolf and bloodborne fire was no longer dormant. She had survived, but she had changed. Adrian was beside her, calm but weary. His fangs had receded, his claws back to normal hands. But she could still feel the pulse of his strength, the centuries of experience and power that made him who he was. He reached for her hand, and when their fingers intertwined, felt like a homecoming. "You did it," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "We did it." Eleanor nodded, though her throat was tight. I couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You don't understand. I only kept you safe until you learned to trust yourself. That's where the real strength comes from, inside you." She looked at him. Really looked, and saw everything she had feared, everything she had loved, reflected in his silver eyes. He had been her protector, her guide, her partner in danger, and now the bond between them was stronger than it had ever been. The council's threat had been ended, at least for now. Their leader had been destroyed in the battle, and the remaining agents had fled, scattered like shadows before sunlight. But Eleanor knew that their world, the hidden world of werewolves, vampires, and the bloodborne, was not gone. There would always be dangers, rivalries, and secrets. And yet, facing them had changed her. She no longer feared the unknown, because she had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Adrian drew her closer, brushing rain-soaked hair from her face. "You are no longer just the child of your family," he said. "You are more. A bridge, a protector, and my mate, if you will let me say it." Eleanor's chest tightened. The word mate carried weight, centuries of promise and danger, but also hope. Her hand pressed against his heart, feeling the steady beat. I choose you," she whispered. "Not because it's safe, but because it's you." He smiled, relief and tenderness washing over him. "And I choose you, Eleanor, always." The courtyard felt different now. The shadows that had once moved with menace were gone, replaced by soft, warm sunlight. Birds returned to the trees, and the air smelled of wet earth and hope. Eleanor closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the silver blood in her veins settle. No longer wild, no longer frenzied. She was in control for the first time. She thought of everything that had been lost: the broken windows, the destroyed cathedral, the fear and pain. And she thought of what had been gained: trust, courage, love, and understanding of her true self. The sacrifices had been heavy, but they had forged her into someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid of the hidden world around her. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "We survived, Eleanor," he said, "and now we can live. Truly live." She smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. Yes, truly live. They spent the day walking through the city, hand in hand, quiet but not awkward. Every glance, every touch reminded them of the storm they had endured together. Even ordinary things: the sound of footsteps on cobblestones, the scent of whetstone, the sunlight reflecting off the river felt extraordinary now. Adrian pointed out a small cafe, and Eleanor laughed. "After everything, coffee and pastries feel like treasures," he chuckled. "Simple treasures, but important. Life is made of them, especially after battles like ours." As they sat together, sharing warmth and quiet conversation, Eleanor reflected on the journey she had taken, from the ordinary streets of Cambridge to the hidden corners of the supernatural world. From fear and confusion to love and power, she had changed in every way. She was no longer just a student, no longer just a girl afraid of shadows. She was a bridge between worlds, a survivor, and someone who had learned the true meaning of courage and choice. Evening came, soft and calm, the sky painted in purple and gold. They returned to the cathedral ruins one last time, standing in silence. The stones were scarred and cracked, but they were a testament to their strength. A reminder that survival required pain and determination. Eleanor reached out, touching one of the broken pillars. "It's strange," she said softly, "how destruction can feel like a beginning." Adrian looked at her, warmth and pride in his eyes. "It's always the end of one thing that makes the next possible. And we have each other now. That's what matters." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. "I never thought I could feel this safe again," she admitted. "Or this. Alive." "Alive," he repeated, smiling. "Yes, that's exactly it." Night settled over the city, stars glittering like silver sparks. Eleanor and Adrian remained together, watching the sky, feeling the bond between them deepen with each passing heartbeat. They had faced shadows, betrayal, danger, and fear. They had confronted the prophecy, awakened powers, and discovered truths that could have destroyed them. And yet, here they were, together, stronger, wiser, and forever changed. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting herself absorb the moment. She had lost innocence, but she had gained courage. She had faced darkness, but she had discovered love. She had been tested, and she had survived, not just physically, but in heart and soul. Adrian wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Whatever comes next," he whispered, "we face it together, always." She nodded, tears of relief and joy slipping down her cheeks. "Always," she echoed, and for the first time, Eleanor truly believed it. The world could be dark, and danger could linger, but love, courage, and trust were stronger than fear, stronger than any shadow, any prophecy, any enemy. As they stood there, the ruined cathedral bathed in moonlight, Eleanor understood that this was more than survival. It was a beginning, a life rebuilt from fire and silver, from fear and love, from loss and hope. She squeezed Adrian's hand, her heart steady, her blood calm, her spirit unbroken. The storm was over, and though the future was uncertain, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was no longer afraid. The wind whispered through the broken arches, carrying a promise that the bond they shared would endure all things. And Eleanor smiled, feeling it deep in her soul. For the first time in her life, she was truly home.